All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating idea, a strategy that's all about flipping the script on real estate and community ownership. We're talking about building permanence, production, and power, right from the ground up. So, let's jump in.
So before we get into the nuts and bolts of the solution, you kind of have to grasp the problem it's trying to solve. And it's a big one. We're talking about this long, historical cycle where wealth gets pulled out of certain communities and people get pushed out. And this quote on the screen, well, it just nails it. This cycle erodes generational progress and diminishes community power. That's the core issue we're tackling here. Okay, so how do you even begin to fight something like that? Well, the response laid out here is basically a total 180. It's a direct counterattack. So instead of seeing land and cultural heritage just disappear, the idea is to put that land and those resources directly under community control. Instead of that constant drain of money out of the neighborhood, you build a sustainable local economy that keeps value inside. And instead of economic disenfranchisement, you work towards creating genuinely empowered, self-sufficient communities. It's a big shift in thinking.
All right, so let's get into the model itself. To make all this happen, the strategy lays out a whole new model for ownership. And it's not just one single thing. It's more like a framework, a system, built on 3 key pillars that are all designed to lock in together.
You can think of it like building a 3-story house. Each level has to support the one above it. So at the very bottom, the foundation, you've got step 1, the Community Land Trust, or CLT. This is the bedrock that holds the land forever. Then on the second floor, you have step 2, the operating LLCs. These are the actual businesses, think housing, food, energy, that are built on that community-owned land. And finally, on the top floor, you have step 3, a value-sharing system. This is the part that makes sure all the economic upside, all the benefits, get shared with the residents and investors. It's a complete system. Okay, so let's dig into that foundation, that first layer, the community-controlled foundation. The whole thing rests on this idea of a community land trust. Now, this isn't some fuzzy concept. It's a really specific, powerful legal tool that's designed to do one thing: protect the community's interests for good.
So what exactly is a community land trust? Here's the absolute key takeaway. The trust owns the land itself, permanently, in perpetuity. Individuals or families can own the buildings on top of that land, their homes, but the ground underneath is taken completely off the speculative market. That separation is the secret sauce. It's what keeps things affordable for the long term and stops people from getting priced out. The community holds the key, and the land can't be sold off to the highest bidder.
So a natural question is, okay, who's in charge, right? Who has the power? Well, the governance is set up to be incredibly democratic. The board is intentionally split 3 ways. You've got 1/3 of the seats for the actual residents living on the land, another 1/3 goes to representatives from the broader community, and the final 1/3 is for technical experts and maybe some mission-aligned investors. This structure is brilliant, really, because it means no single group can just run away with the whole thing. It forces collaboration and makes sure the community's voice is front and center.
Now, where this all gets its real bite, its real power, is in the legal paperwork, specifically something called the ground lease. You can think of this as the constitution for the land. It's packed with these ironclad protections. For example, it puts caps on resale prices, which is huge for keeping homes affordable for the next family. It has clauses built right in to fight displacement. And it gives the community the right of first refusal, meaning if someone wants to sell, the community gets the first shot at buying it back. These aren't just suggestions, they're legally binding rules.
Okay, so you have the legal foundation, but an ambitious plan like this needs fuel, right? It needs money. So, let's talk about powering the system. Let's look at the financial engine that's designed to make all of this actually work. So, the funding model uses something called a capital stack. And honestly, the best way to picture it is like a layered cake. At the very bottom, you have what's called first loss capital. This might be from community bonds or philanthropic investors. They're the ones willing to take the biggest risk. Because they've laid that strong, risk-absorbing foundation, it makes the whole project way safer and more attractive for the next layers of money to come in, like private notes, equity, and even public incentives. It's a really smart way to de-risk the whole enterprise and bring different kinds of investors to the table.
And here's where things get really innovative. The model uses a modern tool called tokenization. Now, hold on. Before your mind jumps to crypto and all that wild speculation, let's be super clear. This is not that. Here, tokenization is being used purely as infrastructure. Think of a token as a digital share certificate or a transparent receipt. It represents a tiny, fractional piece of the actual cash flow coming from the real businesses on the land. It's just a super efficient, transparent way to track who owns what and to distribute the profits. It's plumbing, not a lottery ticket.
And that right there is the night and day difference between this model and your typical speculative real estate deal. The goal isn't to buy low and flip high. The entire focus is on generating steady, stable cash flows from real, essential businesses. We're talking rents from affordable housing, revenue from food sales. It's a closed network, which means it's designed for mission-aligned, repeatable returns, not for wild market swings. All right, so we've gone deep on the legal and the financial structures. That's the how. But now for the really exciting part, the what. What does this model actually build? How does all this theory turn into real-world stuff that people can touch and use? Let's get into it from the ground up. One of the absolute pillars of this whole strategy is food. The philosophy behind it is incredibly simple, but also really profound. Food is power. I mean, think about it. If a community can control its own food supply, that's a massive step towards real independence and resilience. And this isn't just about a few community gardens either. We're talking a whole portfolio of agricultural initiatives. You've got things like high-tech urban hydroponic farms for growing fresh produce all year round. You've got larger plots of land, maybe just outside the city, for growing staple crops. And crucially, it's about building direct supply chains, getting that food straight to residents, schools, and hospitals, cutting out the middleman. The whole thing is designed to be a system that also creates good jobs and real career paths in agriculture.
Okay, so you've secured the food supply. What's next? The model then moves on to building what the creators called defensive moats. I love that term. It's about taking control of other essential utilities, like energy and water. This is about building a fortress of self-sufficiency, making the community less vulnerable to outside shocks.
So what do these moats look like in practice? Well, you're looking at things like putting rooftop solar on every possible home and building. But it goes bigger than that. We're talking about community-managed solar microgrids that can actually disconnect from the main grid and run on their own during an outage. You add in smart systems for rainwater harvesting, you build shared resilience hubs with backup power and supplies for emergencies, and suddenly, you've created a community that's way less dependent on a fragile, aging external grid.
So we've seen the vision, the structure, and the real-world applications. It's a pretty amazing picture. But let's be real. A project this ambitious is gonna face challenges, right? So how does the model plan for the inevitable risks and bumps in the road?
Well, what's impressive here is that the strategy doesn't shy away from the risks. It tackles them head on. For the risk of just not being able to pull it off, execution risk, the plan is to start with smaller, phased pilots and create standardized playbooks that can be copied. To deal with the crazy world of interest rates and financial risk, it uses smart strategies like staggered maturities and hedging. For the curveballs that politics or policy can throw, it prepares by having a multi-jurisdiction posture and legal reserves. And for the day-to-day operational risks, it brings in professional third-party managers with super clear goals. And of course, insurance. It's a visionary goal, but with a very down-to-earth, pragmatic roadmap. And all of this, every single piece we've talked about, it all comes back to this one huge question. You see it on the screen right here. Can new models of ownership actually break those old, destructive cycles of extraction? The framework we've just walked through, well, it's a powerful and detailed attempt to answer that question with a firm yes. It's a blueprint for a different kind of future, one where communities don't just survive, but thrive by controlling their own land, their own resources, and ultimately, their own destiny.